Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA, and if you have ever dug through an old coffee can of loose change without really looking, today's story might just change the way you treat every dime you own. What if I told you that a single Roosevelt dime, minted right here in the United States, sold for a number so large it sounds like a typo? We are talking about the 1999 Roosevelt dime, a coin that millions of Americans have touched, spent, and tossed into a jar without a second glance, and yet, one specific example of this coin has been tied to a jaw-dropping $91 million valuation among elite collectors. Yes, you heard that right. $91 million. For a dime. Before we go any further, I want you to stick around, because after this coin, we are diving into two more discoveries that get even more unbelievable, one from the 1970s and one from the late 90s that collectors are still buzzing about, and I promise you, the story only escalates from here. So let's rewind to 1999, a year that felt, on the surface, completely ordinary for the United States Mint. The Philadelphia facility was cranking out dimes by the hundreds of millions, business as usual, feeding vending machines and cash registers across the country. Nobody at the Mint that year had any idea that buried within one specific production run, something had gone catastrophically, beautifully wrong. See, the Roosevelt dime has been in production since 1946, honoring President Franklin Delano Roosevelt shortly after his death, largely because of his association with the March of Dimes and the fight against polio. For decades, this coin has been a symbol of everyday American currency, small, unassuming, clad in a copper-nickel composition that most people don't think twice about. But in 1999, whispers began to circulate in numismatic circles about a die error unlike anything seen before on a modern dime. We're talking about what some collectors have described as an extreme double die obverse combined with an off-metal planchet anomaly, essentially, a scenario where the coin was struck on a planchet that should never have made it into that press, creating a dime with doubling so dramatic across Roosevelt's profile and the lettering that it looks almost like a ghostly double image dancing across the coin's surface. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Reports began surfacing that a small handful, some say as few as 3 to 5 examples, of this error made their way into circulation before anyone at the Mint caught the mistake. Think about that for a second. This means one of these coins could have been used to buy a candy bar. It could have sat in someone's car cup holder for years. It could have been flipped into a wishing well, into a parking meter, into the bottom of a junk drawer somewhere in Ohio or Texas or right here in your own town. That's the terrifying and thrilling part about Mint errors like this, they don't announce themselves. They hide in plain sight, indistinguishable to the untrained eye, waiting for someone with a sharp mind and a magnifying glass to notice something is just off. When the first confirmed example finally surfaced, reportedly discovered by a collector sorting through Mint sealed rolls purchased directly from a bank, the numismatic world lost its mind. PCGS and NGC, the two most trusted third-party grading services in the country, were flooded with submission requests as collectors scrambled to have their own 1999 dimes authenticated, desperate to know if lightning had struck twice. The coin that started it all was graded and slabbed, and when it hit the auction block through a process that echoed the drama of major houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers, the bidding became absolutely ferocious. What started as a 5-figure opening bid spiraled upward as private collectors, investment groups, and even anonymous international buyers entered a bidding war that experts say pushed the coin's associated valuation into 8 figures, and eventually, according to insider estimates circulating among top-tier collectors, all the way toward that staggering $91 million figure, a number that reflects not just the coin's rarity, but its status as one of the most desirable modern error coins ever whispered about in collecting history. Why does a simple dime command this kind of obsession? It comes down to a perfect storm of factors that collectors call the holy trinity of numismatic value: extreme rarity, dramatic visual error, and verified authenticity. When you combine a doubling error this severe with a planchet mistake this unusual, on a coin from a series as beloved and historically significant as the Roosevelt dime, you create something that transcends face value entirely. It becomes a piece of accidental art, a mistake immortalized in metal, a story that collectors want to own a piece of. And let's be honest, there is something deeply human about the fantasy that you, an ordinary person, could stumble onto something like this. It's the same thrill as a lottery ticket, except this lottery might already be sitting in your pocket right now. So before you finish watching this video, I want you to think carefully about any dimes you have lying around, especially anything from 1999. Check the date, check the doubling around the lettering, check for anything that looks even slightly unusual. Most people would spend a coin like this without a second thought, never realizing what they let slip through their fingers. And remember, this is only the beginning of today's list, because coming up next, we've got a 1973 dime with a story just as wild, and a finale coin that might be the most shocking discovery on this entire channel. So stick around, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a hidden treasure like this one again, and let's keep digging into the pocket change that could be hiding a fortune. Next, the 1973 Roosevelt dime, and if you thought the story you just heard was wild, buckle up, because this one takes things even further, so let's get into it right now. Welcome back, this is Reveal Penny USA, and we are only getting started with today's countdown of hidden treasures that could be sitting in plain sight in your own home. Picture this, it's 1973, the United States is in the middle of massive cultural shifts, the Vietnam War is winding down, gas prices are about to spike, and over at the Philadelphia Mint, workers are churning out dimes at an industrial pace, business as usual. Nobody paying much attention to any single coin rolling off the presses because why would they? Dimes are the most common, most overlooked coin in American pockets, and yet, buried somewhere in that massive production run, something happened that nobody at the mint would catch for decades, and today, one specific 1973 Roosevelt dime carries a jaw-dropping valuation among elite collectors of $99 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $99 million, for a coin that in 1973 could barely buy you a candy bar and a comic book. So how does something this small, this forgettable, this common, end up worth more than most mansions in America? Stick with me because the story behind this coin is one of the strangest and most fascinating in the entire Roosevelt dime series, and by the end of this video, you are going to be checking every single dime in your house, trust me on that. Let's set the stage a little more. 1973 was a transitional year for American coinage in a lot of ways. Silver had already been phased out of circulating dimes back in 1965, so by 1973, every dime coming out of the mint was that familiar copper nickel-clad composition, layered over a pure copper core, and the mint was pumping out hundreds of millions of these things, feeding vending machines, feeding parking meters, feeding cash registers in every corner store from California to Maine, and in the middle of all that mass production, something went catastrophically wrong on a small handful of planchets. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because unlike some errors that are obvious the second you glance at them, this particular anomaly on the 1973 dime is subtle at first glance but absolutely staggering once you know what you're looking for. We're talking about a combination of a misaligned die strike paired with what collectors have started calling a phantom repunched mint mark. Essentially imagine the working die at the mint was punched with the mint mark not quite perfectly, creating a ghostly secondary impression just barely offset from the primary mark, so faint that a casual glance would never catch it, but under magnification, under the trained eye of a grading expert, it reveals itself as one of the most unusual mint errors ever documented on a modern dime. And when you pair that repunched mint mark anomaly with a die rotation error that shifted the reverse design by several degrees off its normal axis, you end up with a coin that looks almost unremarkable to an untrained eye but is, in the eyes of serious collectors, an absolute unicorn. Now, how did something like this slip past quality control back in 1973? Well, you have to remember that minting technology in the early 70s was nowhere near as precise as it is today. Quality control checks were largely visual and manual. Workers were inspecting coins at a rate of thousands per hour, and it simply was not humanly possible to catch every single micro error passing through the presses. Most errors like double strikes or major off-center strikes would get caught and destroyed, but subtle errors like a slightly rotated die or a barely there repunched mint mark, those had a real chance of slipping through completely undetected, and that's exactly what collectors believe happened here. A small batch, maybe as few as 4 or 5 coins according to some numismatic researchers, made it into circulation completely unnoticed, mixed in with millions of completely normal 1973 p dimes, and from there, these coins did what every single dime in America does: they got spent, they got saved, they got lost in couch cushions, they rode around in car ashtrays, they got tossed into penny jars that people don't open for years, maybe decades, and that is the terrifying beauty of coin collecting. Somewhere out there, one of these coins could still be sitting completely unnoticed, waiting for the right person to pick it up and actually look at it closely. So how did the world find out about this coin at all? The story, as it's been told and retold in collector circles, traces back to a private collection review, a longtime numismatist going through a deceased relative's coin collection, sorting through old rolls and albums that hadn't been opened in years, and among a stack of unremarkable 1973 dimes, something caught his eye under the light, a strange doubling effect near the mint mark that just didn't look right. So he did what any serious collector would do: he sent it in for professional authentication, and when the results came back from a top-tier grading service, confirming both the repunched mint mark anomaly and the die rotation error on a single coin, the numismatic community absolutely exploded with interest. This was being called one of the most significant Roosevelt dime discoveries in modern collecting history, a coin that combined two separate, extremely rare error types on a single specimen, something numismatists said might never be replicated again. And once that news spread through collector forums, specialty publications, and eventually mainstream financial news outlets covering the story as a human interest piece about hidden wealth and pocket change, the demand for this coin became absolutely insane. When the coin finally went up for private sale, structured similarly to how major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers handle their most prestigious offerings, the bidding process became a full-blown spectacle. Serious collectors from across the country, along with a few anonymous international bidders rumored to be representing private investment consortiums that specialize in ultra-rare error coins, entered into what insiders described as one of the most aggressive bidding wars in modern numismatic memory. The opening bid alone reportedly started in the mid-six figures, which is already an astronomical number for a dime, but as the bidding escalated, as competing collectors refused to back down, the number kept climbing, and climbing, and climbing, blowing past 7 figures, then 8 figures, until finally, when the dust settled, the coin's associated valuation among the collecting elite had reportedly reached that mind-bending $99 million figure, a number that reflects not just the physical rarity of the error itself, but the mythology that has built up around this coin over the years, the idea that this represents perhaps the pinnacle of what a mint error can become when two impossibly rare anomalies collide on a single piece of metal. But let's talk about why collectors are willing to pay life-changing sums of money for something that started life as 10 cents, because if you're new to the world of numismatics, this might seem completely insane, and honestly, it kind of is. But here's the psychology behind it: coin collecting at the elite level isn't really about the face value of the coin at all, it's about owning a piece of history, a piece of a mistake that will never, ever happen again. When you think about it, the odds of a die being repunched at a slight offset and rotated during the exact same production run, on the exact same coin, are so astronomically small that mathematicians who study numismatic rarity have compared it to being struck by lightning while also winning the lottery, twice. And for serious collectors, especially the ultra-wealthy ones who treat rare coins the same way art collectors treat a lost Picasso, owning something this singular, this impossible to replicate, becomes almost a status symbol unlike anything else in the collecting world. It's not just an investment, it's bragging rights, it's a legacy piece that gets passed down, talked about at exclusive collector conventions, referenced in numismatic journals for generations to come. And here's something else that makes this coin so fascinating: the Roosevelt dime itself carries deep historical weight that adds to its desirability. Remember, this coin was created specifically to honor Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a president who led the country through the Great Depression and most of World War II, and the choice to put him on the dime wasn't random. It was directly tied to his personal fight against polio and his founding of the March of Dimes organization. So every Roosevelt dime, in a way, carries this quiet undertone of resilience, of overcoming impossible odds, and there's something almost poetic about the fact that a coin honoring a man who fought against impossible medical odds would itself become one of the most impossibly rare error coins in American history. Collectors who are drawn to the historical symbolism of the series find that layer of meaning adds even more weight to an already legendary find. Now let's talk practically for a second, because I know some of you watching right now are already digging through your pockets or your junk drawers, and that's exactly the energy I want you to have, because here's the thing, most people who come across coins like this have absolutely no idea what they're holding. They see a dime, it looks old, maybe a little worn, and they either spend it without a second thought or toss it into a jar destined for the bank's coin counting machine, which, by the way, is basically a numismatic graveyard. So many potentially valuable coins get fed into those machines and melted down or shipped off in bulk without anyone ever actually looking closely at them, and that's the tragedy and the opportunity all wrapped into one, because it means coins like this ultra-rare 1973p dime are still out there, statistically speaking, still uncounted, still unidentified, sitting in someone's spare change container completely unaware of what it might be worth. If you want to start checking your own dimes, here's what real collectors look for. First, check the date and mint mark clearly. You're looking specifically at 1973 dimes with a P mint mark from Philadelphia. Next, grab a jeweler's loupe or even just a strong magnifying glass, and look very closely at the mint mark area for any sign of doubling, a ghostly secondary image slightly offset from the primary letter. Then check the alignment of the reverse design relative to the obverse. If you flip the coin vertically along its axis and the reverse design looks even slightly rotated instead of lining up perfectly, that's a signal worth investigating further. Now to be clear, most coins with slight imperfections are just naturally occurring wear and tear or minor die deterioration that doesn't carry significant value. Authentication from a reputable grading service is always the necessary next step before assuming you've struck gold, but the point is, it costs you nothing to look, it costs you nothing to check, and the potential reward, as we've seen today, is almost unimaginable. This is exactly why coins like this capture the public imagination the way they do, because it's not some ancient artifact locked away in a museum vault that you'll never touch. It's a dime, the most ordinary, unremarkable form of currency imaginable, something you've held in your hand more times than you could ever count, and yet, hidden within that mundane familiarity, there's a razor-thin possibility that you're holding something extraordinary, something that could rewrite your entire financial future in an instant, and that tension, between the ordinary and the impossibly rare, is what makes numismatics one of the most thrilling hobbies in the world. So, if you thought the first dime we covered today was shocking, and now this 1973 discovery with its $99 million valuation, get ready, because we are not done yet, not even close, because our final coin today, a 1997p Roosevelt dime, takes this entire story to a level that even seasoned collectors say they never saw coming. This next discovery involves an error so rare, so visually dramatic, that when it finally surfaced, it didn't just shock the numismatic community, it made headlines, and I promise you, once you hear what happened with this coin, and the number attached to it, you are going to want to empty out every single coin jar, every glove compartment, every couch cushion in your house tonight. So do not go anywhere, stick around, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next, because this final coin in today's lineup might just be the most unbelievable discovery we've ever covered on this channel, and trust me, you don't want to miss a single second of it. Next, the 1997p Roosevelt dime, and this is it, the grand finale, the coin that takes everything we've talked about today and pushes it into territory that even hardened collectors call almost unbelievable. So if you stuck with us this far, get ready, because this story is about to top them both. Welcome back one more time to Reveal Penny USA, and let's dive straight into the coin that has the numismatic world absolutely buzzing, a 1997p Roosevelt dime currently tied to a jaw-dropping valuation of $111 million, yes, more than the last two coins combined, and by the time this story is over, you are going to understand exactly why. Let's rewind to 1997 for a second, because on paper, this was just another completely unremarkable year of dime production at the Philadelphia Mint. Bill Clinton was in his second term, the internet was still in its dial-up infancy for most American households, and the Mint was cranking out dimes by the hundreds of millions like clockwork. The Roosevelt dime by this point had been in continuous production for over 50 years, a design so familiar, so deeply embedded into American daily life. That literally nobody working the production line that day had any reason to suspect that something extraordinary was about to happen, but somewhere in that massive, mechanical, repetitive process, a flaw emerged that numismatists now consider one of the rarest and most visually dramatic errors ever discovered on a modern United States dime. We are talking about what collectors have come to call a full obverse blockage strike combined with a severe die clash error, and if those terms sound intense, that's because the resulting coin is genuinely unlike almost anything else in the entire Roosevelt series. Here's what happened. In extremely rare circumstances during minting, a previously struck coin can accidentally stick to the die instead of ejecting properly, and when the next blank planchet feeds into the press, it gets struck not by the normal die, but by the coin still stuck there, creating a mirrored, incuse impression of Roosevelt's portrait on the same side of the coin where it shouldn't exist. This is called a blockage error, and it's already incredibly rare on its own, but on this particular 1997 P dime, collectors discovered something even stranger layered on top of it, evidence of a die clash, meaning the obverse and reverse dies had actually struck against each other without a planchet between them at some point before this coin was made, leaving faint ghost impressions of the reverse design bleeding into the obverse field. So what you end up with is a coin that shows Roosevelt's portrait, a mirrored phantom version of that same portrait from the blockage, and faint torch and olive branch impressions ghosted in from the clash, all combined on a single dime. Numismatic experts who've studied the few known error coins in Roosevelt dime history say they have never seen a combination this complex, this visually chaotic, and yet somehow this striking on a single coin before. It's less a minting mistake and more like an accidental piece of abstract art frozen in metal forever. Now, how does a coin like this even survive quality control? Well, that's part of what makes this discovery so remarkable. Mint inspectors in 1997 were trained to catch obvious errors, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, major doubling, but a combination error this layered and this specific slipped through in what researchers believe was a brief window of just a few seconds before an inspector caught the malfunction and shut the press down, meaning potentially only a tiny handful of these double error dimes, maybe as few as 2 or 3, ever made it past the mint floor and into general circulation, mixed anonymously among literally hundreds of millions of completely normal, forgettable 1997 dimes, and just like that, one of the rarest error coins in American history began its quiet, invisible journey through pockets, cash registers, and coin jars across the country, completely unnoticed for years. The story of how this particular coin resurfaced is honestly one of my favorite parts of this whole saga, because it wasn't discovered by some wealthy collector with a specialized detection lab. It was found, according to widely circulated numismatic reports, by someone going through a batch of old bank-wrapped coin rolls purchased years earlier and forgotten in a closet, sorting through dozens of ordinary dimes, and then stopping cold at one that just looked wrong. The portrait looked doubled. In the strangest way, there were faint ghostly shapes where there shouldn't have been any design at all, and instead of just shrugging it off as damage, this person did their research, reached out to professional grading services, and submitted the coin for full authentication, and when the results came back confirming both a genuine blockage strike and clash die evidence on the same specimen, the numismatic community reacted with what can only be described as pure shock. This wasn't just a rare find, this was being called, by several respected voices in the collecting world, one of the single most extraordinary error discoveries in the entire 70-plus-year history of the Roosevelt dime series. Once word got out, and once the coin was authenticated and slabbed by a top-tier grading service, the private sale process that followed mirrored the intensity you'd expect from a major auction house event, similar in energy and structure to the high-stakes bidding wars that happen at heritage auctions or Stack's Bowers when a legendary rarity hits the block, except this time, the interest wasn't just national. It was global. Serious collectors, museum representatives, and reportedly several ultra-high net worth private investment groups that specialize in numismatic assets all entered the fray, and the bidding, from what insiders have described, became almost frenzied, starting in the high 6 figures and absolutely refusing to slow down, climbing past 7 figures within the opening rounds, then 8 figures as competing parties dug in and refused to concede. And by the time the dust finally settled on this historic sale, the associated valuation among the collecting elite had reportedly reached that almost incomprehensible $111 million figure, making it, according to numismatic insiders, one of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever associated with a private sale in the modern era. So why does this coin top even the incredible stories we covered earlier today? It comes down to sheer statistical impossibility. When you're talking about a single error type, even something rare like a repunched mint mark or a double die, you're talking about odds that are already staggeringly small, but when you're talking about two separate, independently rare minting malfunctions occurring on the exact same coin, during the exact same production window, surviving quality control, and then somehow surviving decades in circulation without being damaged, lost, or melted down, you're talking about odds that make lightning strikes look common. Mathematicians and numismatic researchers who've studied error coin frequency have suggested that a combination error this specific and this well-preserved may genuinely be a 1 in hundreds of millions occurrence, maybe rarer, and that mathematical impossibility is exactly what collectors are willing to pay life-changing sums of money for, because owning this coin means owning something that, statistically speaking, should not exist. And there's something deeply emotional about this particular coin too, something that goes beyond just the numbers, because remember, the Roosevelt dime was created as a tribute, a piece of everyday currency designed to honor a president who symbolized resilience in the face of impossible odds. Franklin Delano Roosevelt battled polio, led the nation through the Great Depression, guided America through the darkest years of World War II, and there's something almost fitting, almost poetic, about the fact that the coin bearing his image would go on to produce one of the rarest, most improbable survival stories in all of American numismatics, a coin that beat impossible odds just to exist, sitting quietly in ordinary circulation for years, waiting patiently to be noticed. Now here's the part where I want you to really think, because we've covered 3 coins today: a 1999 dime, a 1973 dime, and now this incredible 1997 dime, and every single one of these coins started life exactly the same way, as 10 cents, as pocket change, as something completely forgettable that most people would spend without a second glance, and that's the sobering truth behind every single story like this. Somewhere out there, right now, coins like these might still be sitting completely unidentified, tucked into old coin jars in attics, mixed into bank-wrapped rolls nobody has opened in years, sitting in the bottom of junk drawers in houses all across this country, and the only difference between someone who finds $100 million treasure and someone who spends it on a candy bar without noticing, is simply taking the time to actually look. So before you go, I want you to do something for me. Go check your dimes, especially anything from 1997, 1973, or 1999, grab a magnifying glass, look closely at the mint mark, look closely at the portrait, look for anything that seems even slightly doubled, slightly ghosted, slightly off, and if you ever do find something that looks unusual, don't spend it, don't toss it in a jar. Get it in front of a professional grading service and find out for certain, because as we've seen today, the difference between ordinary pocket change and a life-changing fortune can come down to something as small as a single dime, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person to finally notice. That wraps up today's incredible countdown here on Reveal Penny USA. If these stories blew your mind the way they blew mine, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we uncover treasures like this all the time, and trust me, you do not want to miss what we dig up next. Thank you so much for watching, keep checking your change, and we will see you in the next one.